Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as part of Earth Laws Month. My name is Michelle Maloney. I'm the National Convener and Director of the Australian Earth Laws Alliance. Today, we're really delighted to have a special guest speaker with us, Dimity Williams, who I'll introduce in just a moment. But before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge country. I live, work and play on the beautiful lands of the Jinnaburra and Cubby Cubby peoples in a really lovely, lovely part of southeast Queensland. I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present and emerging leaders and the continuing governance system that Indigenous people have that cares for country and cares for each other. We always like to acknowledge that land was never ceded. There is no treaty in this country, and it's important for the Australian Earth Laws Alliance and also our other sister organisations to recognise that we try to be part of the kind of decolonisation of our thinking about how we live in this place. So there's much work to be done. Today, I'm really delighted because Dimity Williams has joined us, and she is one of the people who is part of a group I deeply admire, Doctors for the Environment. And Dimity's got a book out called Nature, Our Medicine, How the Natural World Sustains Us. And I've been really enjoying reading it. It's rather beautiful, actually. And Dimity's going to talk to us all about what I like to think of as Western science catching up with the idea that not only are we part of nature, but good gosh, we need it. We need so much of it to be healthy and happy and productive and groovy. How are you today, Dimity?
I'm really well, thanks, Michelle. And it's great to be here and have a conversation with you about nature and medicine, of course, which I love to talk about. So
yeah, absolutely. Before we get started, and you're going to give us a presentation, which I'm looking forward to, can you tell us about, you're a doctor, you're an actual real grown-up GP. Did you want to just briefly introduce yourself? For someone like me, who's kind of a pretend lawyer type, real GPs are magical beings, but did you want to tell us about your qualifications, your background?
Well, I thought I would do that as I begin the talk, actually.
Yes, good.
Okay. Yeah.
No, a lot of people forget to introduce themselves, so I just wanted to make sure that people knew your background. So, well, that's terrific. In which case, we'll hand over to you, Dimity. Today's webinar will be the usual format. We'll have a lovely talk from Dimity, and if you have any questions at any time, please put them in the chat. This talk is being recorded, and we'll be able to share it later. So pop your questions in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Thank you so much, Dimity.
Great, thanks. I'll just share my screen, hopefully smoothly. Okay, so thanks so much again for having me at lunchtime today. I also wanted to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country I'm speaking to you from, who are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects and express my gratitude for their care of country. And, of course, being the first scientists and the first healers, we have so much to learn from them. And I feel like I'm learning all the time and still obviously have so much to learn. And also I'd like to acknowledge that, yes, they're still waiting for treaty and that and truth telling, and obviously the voice, which is coming up later this year. So, yeah, I'll just begin by I'm just trying to go to the next slide. There we go. Yes, so as Michelle mentioned, I'm a doctor, a real life breathing GP, and I've been doing it for quite a long time, nearly 30 years actually. So I'm feeling like quite an old hand. So the great thing about working in general practice is, that we get to get to forge a relationship with people who come to see us. So we see them over a long period of time. So I have some patients who, I was looking after their mums when they were in utero, and now they're growing into young people. So seeing people across the lifespan and also appreciating and understanding their health and well-being within the broader context of their family and the community they live in and their work situation, and of course what's happening more broadly. So yeah, it's a unique perspective, I think, the perspective of a GP when it comes to health. And then alongside my work as a GP, I've had this kind of parallel career for the last 15 or so years in environmental advocacy. And this has been in various forms. So there's a few here on the screen. So on the right, you can see as a community climate action group, I became co-founded and became involved with quite heavily when I first switched on to climate change and what it meant for people and planet. And so here we are all, giving a bit of grief to our federal member, who was Peter Costello at the time. And then I became involved with Doctors for the Environment, which is the middle picture. And I've been working with them for about 13 years. Doctors for the Environment Australia is a national organisation of doctors and medical students from all different facets of medicine. So we have researchers, GPs, psychiatrists, every different sort of specialty you can imagine, and from all across the country. People working in big hospitals, people working on Aboriginal communities, people working in the cities. And we work together to try and highlight this relationship between health and the natural world. And how if we harm nature, we harm human health. So that means trying to engage with politicians, with the broader medical community, and with the wider general community on these issues. So we write lots of submissions, we present at conferences, we write scientific papers, all sorts of things. And on the far left, that's a photo of me in the Tarkine or Takanya part of Tasmania in the rainforest there. So I've been involved with the Bob Brown Foundation to try and raise awareness, to try and protect this area from logging and mining. So been there on a couple of occasions to try and bring about some protection for that area too. Yeah, so all these sort of different facets of my work. And also I was a co-founder of the Kids in Nature Network, which we started about 10 years ago. And its signature event is called Nature Play Week. And it really seeks to highlight the importance for children's wellbeing and development to spend time out in nature. And also this helps to grow this connection and love of nature, which really should begin in childhood. So that's another kind of thing that's been happening for me in the background, as well as being a mother myself, I guess, and sort of seeing the challenges that many parents face today, trying to give their kids opportunities to be outside in nature, and how we can navigate that to try and give them the time and space that they need just to simply be outside. And then now I'm an author, and Michelle mentioned my book, Nature, Our Medicine, How the Natural World Sustains Us. And there I am, very proud of myself, having finally finished it. And standing with the wonderful Bob Brown, who very kindly wrote the foreword for the book. So that has been what happened was I had all of this information, of course, from which I was aware of through all this other work that I've been doing. And a lot of it's bound up in scientific journals or policy documents or position statements or government documents. And I really wanted to try and create a more simple language for people to kind of understand and try and reach more people with this same message. So that's the rationale behind the book. So one of the questions I get often asked is what has health got to do with nature anyway, and why would a doctor care about biodiversity? Why don't I just stick to working in the practice? Why don't I just stick to dealing with the patient in front of me? And for me, that's kind of a strange question, really, because there's no true separation between us and nature. We kind of are nature. We are literally covered in life. We have a whole microbiome within us, in our gut and in our mouth and, in other parts of our body. And there's this real dance and interplay between our microbiome and all the living things on and within us and the natural world around us, the soils that our food is grown in, the air that we breathe. We get more than half the medicines we use today have come from the natural world. And if we step back and have more of a Google Earth view of health, we can see that the natural world provides the foundations for our health, the fresh air that we breathe, the water we drink, healthy soils to grow our food, all these different plants and animals that support our well-being. And of course, just being out in nature is so therapeutic for us psychologically and spiritually, and provides also places for us to play and learn. So really, health and nature just they sit together, they nest together. But of course, with society today, we've kind of separated ourselves off from nature, so that's why people can ask the question, what's nature got to do with health? And I think it can be helpful to reflect back on our childhoods, which is why I have this picture of one of my sons when he was little, lying on the ground, because having children for me made me reflect on my own childhood and how different it was to the childhood of children today. So my own children, but also children who I'm seeing in the practice coming in. So I'd like to invite everyone, if they're happy to, just to spend a few moments. They can close their eyes if they like, but just to remember their own childhoods and where their favourite place to play was. And to remember, where that place was and what the sounds and sights of that place were, and, you know, who they were with, whether they were by themselves or with friends, or were they with an adult, and how they felt being in that place emotionally. And what were the sort of senses that the sense that they get. When we take our minds back, we can often feel little subtle changes in our body when we have memories of places. And you can open your eyes again and come back to your computer screen. But for me, when I was a child, I had this really nature-rich childhood, even though I grew up in the suburbs of Melbourne. We had the park at the bushland at the end of the street, and a whole group of us would just play down there after school and on the weekends with no adults in sight, just lots of kids of all different ages together. And there's this real sense of freedom and exploration and spaciousness. And I don't think we'll really have time today, but people might like to share later with their family or their friends, you know, what their memory was like and what their childhood was like. And if we think about that and then we compare that to childhood today, where children are generally rushed from place to place, and they've less time, and there's also less nature around for them to engage with. And it's something I think we really need to hold on to, that appreciation, because we then see that flow out into our healthcare system with the sorts of things that are coming in to doctors and healthcare settings all over the place. And there's this disconnect through this lack of nature and lack of time in nature. I think is really encapsulated so beautifully by Loonig in this cartoon. So it's sort of called the joys of spring, I think. So there's a man outside enjoying the joys of spring, but he's actually just completely absorbed in his device. And I think it's important to understand that now we spend so much time in front of a screen. We've literally moved inside to sit down and look at a screen. And so screen spaces have taken the place of green places in our lives. And even when we go outside, we're often just got our earbuds in and we're listening to a podcast, or we're having a conversation with someone who's nowhere near us. So this sort of become disconnected often from one another, which is why we currently have an epidemic of loneliness, despite people being theoretically more connected than ever before. And we're disconnected from our sense of place. And sometimes people are even disconnected from themselves. So how does this translate, this disconnection from nature, to our health system? Well, general practice has changed really radically since I first started almost 30 years ago. So now we have this preponderance of what we call NCDs, or non-communicable diseases, or non-infectious diseases. So these are things related to our lifestyle. You know, we evolved outside in nature, moving around. We didn't evolve sitting down in front of a computer screen, scrolling through our social media. So our brain and our body aren't designed for this lifestyle. So that's why we see things like obesity and heart disease and diabetes and certain sorts of cancers. We're having almost, I would describe as a tsunami of mental health problems in younger and younger people. So anxiety and depression, obviously, eating disorders, self-harming behaviours, difficulty with sleep and attention, addictions, not just, you know, things like cigarettes and drugs and alcohol, but also addictions to screens, addictions to computer games, addiction to online pornography. And these things flow through to fracture home life. So we see domestic violence, loneliness, people living very isolated lives, which has health consequences, actually, is related to depression and heart problems as well. And of course, COVID is layered on top of all that as well, with the last, 3 years or so that we've been going through COVID. So there's been even more fracturing and isolation from that. And then there's this lovely quote I thought I'd include from David Suzuki, which is, "Our great boast is the possession of intelligence, but what intelligent creature, knowing the critical role of air for all life on Earth, would then proceed to deliberately pour toxic materials into it? We are air, so whatever we do to air, we do to ourselves. And this is true of all the other sacred elements." And he's referring to water and soils and those kinds of things when he's saying sacred elements. So, if we harm our environment through climate change or pollution, or through logging and land clearing and loss of biodiversity, obviously we're harming the natural world. But what many people haven't realised or don't realise is that it circles back around and we end up harming ourselves. So climate change is now regarded as the biggest public health threat we're facing this century. So bigger than cancer, bigger than COVID, bigger than heart disease. So climate change is a massive health problem. Air pollution is a huge health problem. In Australia, air pollution causes more deaths than the road toll. So, this is from pollution from burning gas and other fossil fuels for our cars or for powering our energy. Plastic pollution, which of course it doesn't look nice to see bits of plastic floating around, but the plastic fragments down, and we end up through our exposure in our food supply and so forth to various chemicals within plastic. They accumulate in our body, and they're related to certain disruption of our endocrine system, which is our glands and hormones, and also accumulates in certain tissues. And certain chemicals do this as well. So it's no surprise really that our rates of breast cancer, for example, which were, we had a lifetime risk, I think, of 1 in 14 when I was a medical student. Now it's about 1 in 9. So, this is relating to what we've been doing to our environment. Our loss of biodiversity has meant, threats to our food supplies. We harm pollinators and other animals. And finally, COVID, which we know is what we call a zoonosis, which is a new type of infection which has jumped from animal species to humans. And that's come about because of an erosion of the natural barriers between different species and between humans. And when there's a breakdown in the natural barriers, we see these novel viruses arriving. So HIV is one. And of course, now we have COVID. So if we harm nature, we are harming ourselves. And we can't think of our health without thinking about the health of the natural world around us. And I think that on the right-hand side of this graphic, you can sort of see the alternative to harming our planet is to heal our planet. And through healing our planet, we're also going to be healing ourselves at the same time. So, of course, that brings me back to that point you raised initially, Michelle, about we need to catch up and think about seeing the world differently. And we can look to ancient cultures for that. And we can particularly look to the longest continuing culture on Earth, which is the culture and the philosophies of of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I think I've got time to share a little story about this is one of my sons with a man called Willie Gordon up on his country north of Cooktown. And this was a really profound learning moment for my family, because we went for a walk up through this beautiful open woodland. And of course, we're from Melbourne, so we're a bit weak in the tropical heat. And we got to the top of a hill, and we all had a drink, and Willie pointed out a little lizard that we hadn't, of course, noticed on the ground. And he turned to my son and said, "Well, you've had a drink. Do you think maybe that lizard over there might like a drink?" And my son said, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess so." But he didn't know how to go about giving him a drink. And Willie said, "Well, if you just pour a little bit of your water from your drink bottle into that leaf and put it on the ground, the lizard will go and have a drink." So Ben carefully poured the water into the leaf, and sure enough, the lizard scurried across and drank the water from the leaf. And it was this, this way of kind of noticing and then caring for country. And it was so different to how we would have been. If we'd been there on our own, we probably would have just marched on by and not noticed the lizard at all. And we might have taken a photo of it, but I don't think we would have thought to provide care and look after that lizard, to see that as something that needed to be looked after. So I think this is a new way of thinking that we need to be bringing into our systems. And as I said earlier, the natural world supports our health in all these different ways. So there's medicines and food, the foundations of our health. And we now have good evidence that, of course, spending time in nature is what we're meant to be doing. So it nurtures us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There are a few theories about how this happens. So from a scientific point of view, I guess we need theories and we need to understand why it is that we feel better when we're in nature. So there's a biophilia theory, a stress reduction theory, and the attention restoration theory. And I go into more detail of those in our book. But essentially that's that we've evolved out in nature, and so it's sort of a natural thing for us to do. When we're out in nature, we're not in the inherently stressful environment that our urban life creates. So that's the sounds of the city, the air pollution, the sound pollution, the light pollution, the stimulation we get all the time from our screens. So it's much more calming for us to be out in nature. And that just looking at a canopy of a tree moving in the wind, or looking at the waves, is just really healing for our mind and helps to restore our attention. So there's quite good evidence now for all of these things. There are a range of experiences of nature connection. I think of it as going from shallow to deep. So the shallow end would be looking out the window onto a natural view. Famous study that was done quite a long time ago now found that patients who are in hospitals who looked out onto a natural view recovered quicker after surgery and needed fewer medications, and so were discharged home more quickly than those who looked out onto a concrete wall. So, looking out onto nature, or having pot plants inside on your desk, listening to nature sounds, these are all ways of bringing nature into our work and home life and our healing settings or our healthcare settings. And of course, getting out into nature, the richer the natural experience. So in the deep end would be going on a prolonged time out in nature or out on country, and that would have the most therapeutic effect for us. But there's benefits with all experiences with nature, but particularly when they involve water, and particularly when there's lots of biodiversity. And by that, I mean lots of different plants and animals around us. So there's a couple of examples of how this works in medicine or in a healthcare setting. So bringing nature in. This is a nice picture of a garden that Stephen Wells created at the rehabilitation hospital here in Melbourne. And this beautiful garden was previously just flat, dirt on either side. And he created that with patients and in what's called, and others called, horticultural therapy. And so that's where people kind of garden with, to kind of get them outside into the fresh air, and they're creating something beautiful. And these gardens in hospitals now are places of therapy, but also for people to come who are visiting the hospital, and in hospitals where patients are for a long, long time, it's really nice for them to be gardening, because they feel like they're caring for something rather than just being in care themselves. And it feels a bit more like normal life, to be doing something like that. Other examples are getting people out into nature. And so these are doing what we call green referrals. So we might refer someone to an outdoor health program, kitchen garden programs, bush kindergartens, bush adventure therapy, and nature-based therapy or nature-based counselling. So there's all different approaches that can be used. The Feel Blue Touch Green was a lovely program where people with chronic mental illness were taken out to be involved with landscape sort of restoration programs. And of course, they restored the landscape around them, but also improved their mental health outcomes and reduced their loneliness and isolation, and improved their social connection and community. So there are these great ways that we can be helping people's health and well-being, and also helping heal country at the same time. Here's an example from overseas. This is a man called Quing Lee who started what's called forest bathing, which I thought I'd mention because many people have heard of this. And this was developed in Japan by their forest industry, actually. And they have forests which are accredited for forest therapy. And what happens is that in a forest therapy session, you go and spend 2 to 3 hours in a forest, just slowly walking around or sitting near the trees and taking nice deep breaths of the fresh air. And they are registered, and people are referred by doctors to go to certain forests for their health benefits, because it's been found that spending time in forests and in natural areas like this helps lower blood pressure, slow heart rate, change the hormones in the body, so lowers the stress hormone cortisol, which of course is not good for us to be having lots of cortisol in our body all the time, and is generally kind of healing. It also helps our white cells, the cells that fight cancer and infection, to become more active when we spend this prolonged time in a forest. So there's a lovely example of work that's been done overseas, and now people are starting to be doing that here in Australia as well. Here I am with my nature prescription. Generally, it's not good for doctors to self-prescribe, but I think a nature prescription is an okay thing to self-prescribe. So a nature prescription is where a doctor writes a prescription for a patient and advising them to spend a certain amount of time in nature on a regular basis for their health problems. So I do this regularly for people who might be having some sort of mental health issue or a sleep difficulty or feeling generally stressed, or people with borderline high blood pressure who want to do everything they can to avoid going on medication. So together we talk about where they like to go in nature, what they like to do, what's going to be achievable for them. And then we write the prescription. So this is my prescription. So I just go out in the backyard every morning and spend half an hour lying on the ground looking up at the tree canopy. And that, helped me certainly get through working in Melbourne through COVID when it was extremely stressful. So a nature prescription is something that is fairly new in Australia, but is used quite a lot overseas, so particularly in Canada and the US and the UK. So something that people might be interested in exploring, and I have information about that on my website if people are interested, and have a little PDF that people can write their own nature prescription if they want to, or take it into their doctor and get them to do it with them. But that's something, it's a new approach, and I think it's part of this way of getting people out into nature and getting them to see nature as the natural world as a therapeutic place for them. I think Lunig says it again here beautifully. It's got, what are you doing? I'm using my device. And what is your device? Well, it's the sky. Does it have many applications? Well, it has moon, clouds, sun, and birds. And you have to recharge it. Well, I never recharge it because it recharges me. So this lovely, it just encapsulates it so beautifully, this fairly old cartoon now. And Stephen Gould talks about this too. He says, we cannot win the battle to save the species and environments without first forging an emotional bond between ourselves and nature as well, because we won't fight to save what we do not love. And I think it's a really important thing for people in the environment movement to understand that we need to allow people to really connect with nature and feel this love and connection for nature to help them bring about repairing and caring for it. And there's a little quote there I've got from the end of my book. I'll just read it if you like. This is kind of the overarching goal of what I'm hoping for. So imagine a future where healthcare settings are naturally healthy places to be, with fresh air, plentiful plants, and images and sounds of nature. Landscape-based health interventions embedded within our medical system will help restore well-being to those suffering. Forest bathing programs will see old growth forests and native forests protected and cherished for their health-giving values, and degraded ecosystems will be regenerated by those seeking community, friendship, and meaning. all children will have time and space to play in nature. Bush kinders, kitchen gardens, and outdoor learning and adventure will be an integral part of young people's lives. They will be given every opportunity to feel the wonder and awe of nature. This nature-fueled revolution, invigorated by a sense of care, will intuitively address the twin problems of climate change and biodiversity loss, because those with a green heart and mind, with the spirit of deep listening, will make the right choices. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dimity.
Yeah.
And so Sarah or I will put the link for your book into the, thank you, Sarah. Sarah has done it already. And if you would like to stop sharing, we can have a chat. And if others have questions, please do put them in the chat. Otherwise, we've only got about 20 minutes. So we will be able to fill that with some very important conversations. So questions from me, Dimity.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is, obviously in the world of work, I've been around environmental issues for 35 plus years. So to watch doctors for the environment emerge and now nature prescriptions, can you talk a little bit about what it might have been like in the early days of trying to get, well, not trying to get, it's probably still trying to get now, but how have Western doctors started to engage with this, and what have been, and what are perhaps still some of the barriers, or what are the conversations you have to get more doctors talking about the power of nature?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's a good question. Yeah, we're not kind of there completely yet. It's changing. And because I think there's a lot of pressures because of the system that we work in, our healthcare system is very time pressured. And so some doctors, feel like maybe it's quicker just to issue a normal prescription. And I think there can be an internal barrier within the doctor themselves, feeling that maybe the patient will think it's a bit funny if they suggest a nature prescription. But my experience has been, I've been doing this for quite a while now, is that patients really like it. Of course, it's done it in an appropriate clinical context. If you're coming in with severe abdominal pain or COVID, I'm not going to suggest a nature prescription. But if you're coming in with what many people come in with, which is really being stressed out or struggling with some sort of mental health issue, as I said before, then people want to do all sorts of, as much as they can. And, I guess Western medicine for mental health problems often has had, we can put you on medication, or we can refer you to see a psychologist, but by the way, you might not get into the psychologist for 3 months and it's very expensive, so that people want to be able to do things, want to be able to help themselves. And people also generally feel really good in nature. They know they feel good in nature. And so this is kind of like giving people permission. I think because we live in this culture of busyness, almost like a cult of busyness, like we have to be doing something all the time. We can't just go for a walk. We have to go for a walk and listen to a podcast and learn something at the same time, So a nature prescription is permission to be quiet and just be outside, just to be a human being rather than a human doing, So it's generally very well received, and I think we're often starting from a really, like, many people have very little time where they relax out in nature. So even just setting 15 minutes once a day or a couple of times a week can be quite a big thing to begin with for a lot of people. But once they start doing it, they realize they feel really good. And I've found too, because I also have an interest in mindfulness meditation, which of course has got a huge evidence base for helping people as well. But some people find that with mindfulness, what happens is when you pay attention to what's happening in your mind, you realize that your mind is actually, full on, and there's a lot of thinking going on. And that can be really hard to sit with at the beginning. So some people don't like that much. They get a bit stressed out. But when you go outside, and you're just suggesting people walk to the park or look at the trees or listen to the birds, they're kind of taken out of their mind in a way, and they're noticing the world around them, the natural world around them. So they actually find that an easier thing to do. So certainly there are still some barriers there, which is part of the reason for me writing the book. I mean, I've been talking to doctors about this for some time as well, and I feel that the book and reaching people through talks like this and in other forums, people can then go into their doctor and say, you know what, I heard this talk or I read about a nature prescription, and I'd like to explore that, and here's what here's some information. Because I find myself, I learn from my patients all the time. People come in, people are very educated now. They've usually just worked out what they think's wrong with them. They've done a bit of research, and so it's kind of, I would want to empower people to go in and ask and have that conversation about are there other things I can do, and and we will get there. We're getting there. There's certainly big changes in the design of hospitals too, like the new Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. That was probably not that new now, maybe 10 or 15 years old, but it was designed with this knowledge that looking out onto nature is therapeutic. So I think 90% of the patients' rooms look out onto the parkland that the hospital is situated in. And yes, it feels nice and it's therapeutic, but that was an economic decision as well. So, and same with bringing gardens into hospital settings. So yeah, and we know now after COVID how important ventilation is, or fresh air. Like, who knew that we needed to breathe fresh air, right? We had to kind of prove it and have a pandemic to appreciate that we need fresh air. So yeah, things are gradually shifting.
Now, that's a great point, actually, that the hospital's choice was an economic one, because obviously someone showed that looking out over nature gets your patients out the door quicker, which is a terrible way to explain it. But yeah, that's really good.
And if we're having people are spending time out in nature, and I didn't really outline this a lot, but like, you're more physically active, you get healthy exposure to sunlight for healthy levels of vitamin D. You're less stress, less cortisol, lower blood pressure. So you're not going into hospital in the first place, So it's a preventative health. So there's a huge economic argument for nature prescriptions as well.
Can we go back to the idea of how we educate our doctors? And I'm interested because the work of our organisation, AILA, into the future, we realise that there's only so much you can talk about with folks who are already aware, and we all need to reach out to aspects of our community that don't think so much about nature. So I wonder, do GPs get together at conferences like other professions? I'm sure they do. Do you and Doctors for the Environment have strategies for how you teach other doctors to be the ones initiating these ideas rather than just relying on patients?
Oh, yes, we do. So yes, recently I've also provided nature with connection experiences for people, so that because some people aren't quite sure how to slow down or how they would fit it in. So that's something that I took a group of doctors through at that conference. So how to do that, because I think if you can experience something for yourself, you're much more likely to take it on and start doing it. So we are doing things like that, and trying to forming in the process of forming a community of practice around nature prescribing to try and encourage others to do that. But we often look to other countries. I think it's a bit of a legacy of our colonial history that we often look to, what's happening overseas. And the NHS in the UK is doing a lot of work in nature prescribing. And there's an evidence base now that comes from there. So I think people are, if you mention that that's what's happening overseas, then that helps people. People want to feel like they're doing something that's got research behind it. But a lot of what we do in healthcare medicine, not everything has high level research behind it. A lot of what we do is common sense. And I think there's a huge common sense argument that we evolved outside moving. And I think most people get it when you kind of explain it like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know, speaking about the sort of professional development, I have a young relative who's now 26 and has spent a lot of years at being educated to be a doctor. And his pace and the work they do to be educated to be young doctors is, I did a combined degree and then later a PhD, but I'm horrified by the hours he's keeping as a student. So do you guys have plans to infiltrate getting sort of nature experiences for some of the medical students to help them think about not just how they treat others, but how they, again, connect to nature? Is that something that Doctors for the Environment is doing or can do?
Well, I'm sure you'd appreciate Doctors Environment is a voluntary organisation trying to do a whole lot of stuff. So yes, there is definitely an active program to, to get health, to get medical faculties educating medical students about climate change and all these major environmental things, and also about nature prescribing. I think often the environment movement, and even within Doctors of Environment Australia, has been a big focus on climate change and air pollution and gas and those kinds of things, and on the, I guess, countering the harms to nature rather than talking about the therapeutic benefit of being in nature. So it's coming, but the Canadian Medical Association recently endorsed it being nature prescribing being embedded within the medical curriculum in Canada and being embedded within routine medical care. So
that's awesome.
It's happening overseas again.
Yeah.
But, it will start happening here, but it's hard for Doctors of the Environment Australia to do everything, to do all these things. So it is starting to make change within the medical education system. And I think the point you raised about how stressful it is, working through the pandemic, medicine's stressful. Working the system that we work in is stressful. And with the pandemic, it's been extra difficult. And so it's been really important to look after ourselves. It's hard for everyone. Of course, it's been hard for teachers as well. And hard for everybody, people having to try and work from home with family, etc. So, that's the thing about nature, and trying to get people to be spending even just 10 minutes several times a day can be very good at helping recenter you and calm you. Instead of going outside and scrolling through your social media for 15 minutes, well, you could just turn your phone on silent, set the timer for 15 minutes and look at the sky, and a much better a mind to come back into your work later on in the day.
That's great. We've got a couple of questions coming up. Michelle has asked, how would you define spirituality? Now, that's a big question.
Well, I think spirituality is trying to connect with that which is much larger than us, which we don't necessarily understand, and that will be different for different people. So for some people that is a religion, and other people it's connecting with this bigger, vast, all of the life around us. I don't really have a good answer for that. I haven't been asked that before.
No, well, thank you. And it's a big question. I'm not sure I could answer it off the top of my head. I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think about the spirit as particularly human feeling, but I'm perhaps agnostic. So I'm not sure my definition of spirit would be similar to someone with a stronger faith. So, but I guess while we're thinking about spirit, to me, it's a sort of, whether you think of it as intuitive or common sense, or what Western science might say phenomenological, it's obviously good for the spirit normally to be in nature. Obviously you have a camping trip where everything gets flooded and you get eaten by mozzies. That's not therapeutic, but the general benefits of getting out and about and breathing in clean air is pretty good for the human spirit. So in terms of that, the energy, the joie de vivre, all the lovely things. So that's one aspect.
I think it's almost indefinable in a way, but to me it's that kind of connection with all that's around. The feeling of deep connection to all that's around and within sort of how I would describe it, I think.
And certainly it's, for me, I think one of the reasons I find this topic so fascinating is that for many decades, I've worked in and out of what I think of as kind of the structures of Western disciplinary thinking in law, politics, these artificial labels we put around knowledge, right? And then we have Indigenous friends who it's all connected and blended, and deep ecology friends who for them, it's all connected, it's all blended. And I feel that way, but my brain still acknowledges that our society doesn't think that way. So when I see, I think you've picked up on my interest in how we get people who are being really forged, their thinking is being forged through the heartlands of Western science, to actually connect with nature is so important and so excellent. I just find that a really interesting space. And I think it connects to the next question someone called Paul has asked, and I'm just going to paraphrase it. He's saying, how big of a barrier is it that modern medicine and Western science normally fails to understand or acknowledge the role of nature and the role of consciousness, that it's nearly always more about matter, you know, the science of materialism almost. I mean, I would assume that's a big barrier, but in your view, how often do people really engage with these ideas that the modern Western science is more about cause and effect, materialism, not the human spirit, and these bigger barriers? What are your thoughts, Dimity?
Well, I think we have to accept that people are questioning that, because I think many people are not just seeing their doctor, they're often seeing someone else. You know, people often will see they might see someone for acupuncture, or they might see someone for a naturopath, or they might see, they might do all sorts of other things. They don't look after themselves often only through going to the doctor. I think people are nurturing themselves in all different ways. So I think, and I think it is alienating. I think medicine actually has always historically been thought of as an art and a science. You know, there is an art to medicine. Yes, there's the science part, but there's an art to it as well. And that's why I find working the way I do in general practice, which is difficult in our system, but is spending time being with people and listening to people, that there's something that's therapeutic in that encounter. Yes, it takes a bit longer, but there's a bit of an art to that. It's not pure science sometimes, that it's almost a bit intuitive, and often people will say, you can just tell if the person in front of you is seriously ill or not seriously ill. There's something that's kind of something going on there in this interaction that's not just, maybe science will be able to explain it all one day, but it's not simply just science. So there is both those things together. And I think we've kind of got a bit more preoccupied with the science and this idea that we need to prove everything, like we have to prove, like there is research now happening around nature prescriptions, and it seems that the aim of the research is to find out how much we need, what's the minimum amount of time we need to have in nature, to kind of get the benefit, and I sort of worry that we're going to end up deciding, well, we need to look at the color green for 15 minutes twice a day and that's enough. It's like taking this beautiful, complex experience that is necessary for us and which we've got this deep need for, and trying to kind of pull it apart.
Quantify, measure it, analyze it, right. then report back on the metrics. Yeah, that's exactly what our Western culture does to everything.
Yeah.
It's obsessed with the analysis. Sometimes it cares about the synthesis, but it really doesn't care as much about the holisticness. But that said, there's a couple of lovely comments. Lou has said, great question, previous question, Paul. I'm studying Regen Ag, and lots of my lecturers are pushing and supporting science returning to holism or holistic ways and moving away from just reductionist mindsets. It's really fascinating. And I agree. I think this stuff is... to me, it's like the meeting place between hundreds of years of Western ways of thinking and knowing. And let's be honest, thinking we're superior to other ways of knowing, and actually starting to relearn what it is to be emanations of the living world. Just lovely temporary body filled with the stardust of galaxies. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We are nature. Samantha has said, gosh, Dimity, I truly wish there were more GPs like you in the world. It's very difficult to find a GP open to considering a holistic approach. Considering and seeing a GP, sometimes have to see a naturopath and an acupuncturist as well. So I agree, and that's why I keep asking questions. How do we educate and share all this good stuff with upcoming doctors, more doctors? I'm obsessed with how we get these wonderful ideas out. So yeah. Actually, I think that was a question earlier on. Sorry if I missed it. Rachel has said, I think the denial is also because the medical model doesn't commonly allow space to rethink and reconceptualize interactions between the systems within which people live. And perhaps I could suggest that the Western system has also really nurtured this idea that only the expert knows things. I have experienced that through going through cancer myself and meeting a lot of older patients who were frightened of doctors and wouldn't ask questions, and that they just felt the doctor knew and they knew nothing. And I remember saying to a little old lady in chemo, no, if you're not feeling that this is working, or you need to be, you need to talk to people about it. Oh, they know what they're doing. And yes, they do. But there is that feeling of expertise versus the ordinary human who's just suffering the stuff.
Yeah, I know it's alienating, isn't it? And I think there's so many parts to that when we think about, I mean, the medical education is really just a product of our culture, and our culture is very hierarchical and arguably white supremacist, and there's that legacy of colonization. Yeah. So this idea of the white doctor, speaking down to the people who don't know, the white expert, and I think, yes, there's a lot to change there, isn't there?
Yeah. Yes, I would have thought so. And that's why I admire you and the work of Doctors for the Environment, because it's kind of similar. I've spent 15 years talking to lawyers. And in the early days, when we would even talk about concepts like rights of nature, I would get laughed at. People were rude to me in conferences because, that is not what law is. It is, and like these ideas of challenging what professions and disciplines think they are. Sometimes you appear to be the strange one until everyone else starts to pick up on it, and then it becomes much more normal.
I know that resonates strongly with me. And, I've been talking about this nature connection for a long time. And I have to say that even within Doctors for the Environment, it was seen as being a little bit, shouldn't we talk about climate change and fossil fuels and, parts per million of CO2 and, it's and even when you talk about green hospitals, it's all about wastewater energy consumption, but there's actually nothing green, right?
Yeah.
So it's not finished.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to think back that we've come a long way. Like
No, it's wonderful. And it is deeply encouraging. There's a number of folks saying, thank you so much. Can't wait to read your book. So that's really cool.
Nice.
And certainly, Dimity, what I'd love to see with groups like the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, who, our interests are these underpinning structures of Western industrialized countries. And these ideas are so deeply embedded that making the kinds of change, and that, as you said in your several quotes and your comments, it's going to be more powerful for people to make the change we need to make to address these problems like climate change and biodiversity loss, when we understand ourselves and we understand how important nature is. So I think this work is important. So Ayla would love to find ways to collaborate with yourself and Doctors for the Environment to try to get more of these ideas out into the world. So corrupting the young is good, but we also have to, that's my gentle way of saying teaching the young, sorry, but we really do need to be teaching older people too, who are stuck in their professions and perhaps need this kind of love themselves.
Yeah. I think we all do, and I think that nature connection and experiencing nature is a way to connect to people's hearts as well. I think we can throw all the facts and the science at people, but you really need to feel it in your heart. And if you kind of go outside and you feel better, well, it's good if it lowers your blood pressure as well. But if you feel better and then you're out there, once you're out there, you kind of notice everything around you and you start to connect to that place. And so you start to love that place and then you advocate for that place, So I think it has to go that way, sort of like rather than going the other way.
Yeah. No, we agree for sure.
Yeah.
And so as we wrap up, Dimity, it's been lovely hearing from you and chatting with you. What's next? You obviously have a lot of people to chat to about your book, but are there other projects on the bubble, either with you or Doctors for the Environment, that you'd like to share with us?
So I'm talking obviously about my book, and I've got a nice talk coming up at the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne in October about nature and cities for children. So trying to advocate for children to get the time and space in nature. We're setting up a community of practice around nature prescribing, hoping to get all different sorts of health professionals, but starting with doctors, I think.
Where will we be able to find out? Will that be sort of something featured on the website for the Doctors for the Environment? That's something that Ayla would love to keep in touch with. So
I think we're going to start doing it through Facebook, actually.
Yeah,
probably. It's a work in progress, but I'll keep you in the loop when we've got it sorted.
Please do. Yeah, through our networks, even just people who are not doctors but passionate about nature, human connection. There'd be a wide audience of folks who'd be very interested in that. So
great. And then I'm also in the process of kind of developing some nature connection experiences for people to try and to give them this felt experience of being out in nature, so then they can sort of embed it into their life and feel better.
No, and I think Westerners will respond to the idea that, oh, it's not just me being cute and fluffy to go out into the bush. I need to. It's important.
My doctor told me to.
We will feel reassured that when other people scoff at the fluffiness of it all, perhaps, maybe not, we can at least back it up with Western science, as well as knowing that it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, well, there's lots of in my book. I've got lots of research in there. So it's there. There's an evidence base there.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great for those parts of society or parts of our own minds that need to have that backup. So,
yeah, absolutely. And yes, exactly. And I hope people find the book helpful. And I've tried to. It's quite sciencey, I think, but not everyone gets taught science at school, and people hear terms like climate change and biodiversity bandied about, and they don't really know what it means. So I've tried to kind of go back to unpack that for people and really tease out this relationship between health and nature from a science point of view, and then give people ideas about how they can bring nature into their lives and help themselves and their families feel better. So hopefully people like that. And with on my website, I go into a little bit of there's some information there on connecting to place and nature play and nature prescriptions, and then people can also connect with me through Facebook or Instagram, just Nature Our Medicine. So love to hear from people.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, lovely ladies and gentlefolk who have joined us today. We've really enjoyed your talk, Dimity, and having this discussion, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everyone for your time and your lovely comments. Someone's just asked the name of your Instagram page, Dimity. Did you want to put that?
Oh, it's just Nature Our Medicine.
Nature Our Medicine.
Kept it simple. It's all the same.
Yes, nice. That's very good marketing. Very good marketing.
Well, I don't know if it's marketing. It's simple.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again, Dimity, and we hope to see you all again in another discussion soon, and we'll definitely be inviting Dimity back to be talking with more of our Aylaites into the future. So thank you very much, everyone. Please go forth and have 10 minutes in nature. I prescribe it as a non-doctor.
15.
15 is a minimum. Even better. Thank you, Dimity. Thanks so much.
That's okay. Bye.
Bye, everyone.